Ave, true to Christ. Hey everybody, this is Catholic Trash Talk, and today we are going to be talking about the ecumenical councils. Continuing with it, specifically the Lateran III Council. Now this one I'm going to do a little bit differently today. I'm still going to give you guys the video of kind of giving you the breakdown of what's happening, but the canons are really chunky. It's short, but the canons are so chunky that I'm just going to read you the introduction when I get done with the video, and then I'm going to give you a summary of the canons. Because, listen, I don't mind reading to you guys, but this is going to be too much reading per canon. So, yeah, we will get right into it. All right.
Dear Will, thank you for producing this insightful and informative series. I just have one question, though. My bishop is an avid hunter, yet I never see him traveling across the country with hunting hawks and falcons. As an avid hunter myself, I know that one could not possibly hunt so well without their hunting hawk and falcon.
What?
Why is it that you never see bishops traveling around with hunting hawks and falcons? Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, hunters and gatherers, welcome to Clarifying Catholicism. You're watching part 13 of a series on the history of the ecumenical councils according to the Catholic Church. Today we are covering the Third Lateran Council. Much of this information was gathered from Joseph Kelly's The Ecumenical Councils of the Catholic Church, a history. So if you want an in-depth dive into these topics, make sure to pick up a copy of this book. To see the rest of our episodes, check out our playlist in the description. Without further ado, on to the show. The 12th century saw a considerable increase in the size of papal authority. The Roman Curia used their influence as an opportunity to promote a new education system called the university. At these universities, popes promoted something called canon law, a study that produced experts in both spiritual and legal matters pertaining to the church and its role in society. As the papacy's influence grew, so did the need for officials to regulate things. More bureaucracy means more complex and lengthy procedures for anything to get done. And as bureaucracy grows, so does the cost of running things. Some ill feelings from the laity resulted. Some lay people weren't exactly thrilled in seeing the church grow in wealth, especially when church officials flaunted their wealth with little results. So groups began forming that were skeptical of the church's authority. Much of their resentment would eventually culminate in the Reformation. On the imperial front, the Emperor Barbarossa wanted to bring the Holy Roman Empire into a renaissance, but he'd need a partner in crime to get this done. So he handpicked a man to be elected as Pope, but it failed. Instead, a sizable majority voted for a man who took the name Alexander III. Emperor Barbarossa was undeterred, and 3 weeks later he named his own choice, Victor IV. Victor was excommunicated by Alexander, which is a shame because Victor was generally highly regarded, but no one except Barbarossa and his allies were willing to accept him as the true Pope. After a few more failed attempts to install his own Pope, the emperor gave up. In 1179, Alexander was still in power. Not only did he seek to resolve divisions caused by that schism, but he sought to refocus the church on matters it had neglected during this sidetrack. So he called a council in the Lateran Cathedral in Rome. The council opened in 1179, but there were only 3 sessions, all during March. Though it was short, it was well attended by 300 bishops from all over Europe. It issued 27 canons, the first of which restricted the papal election to a college of cardinals and required a 2/3 majority to choose the new pope. Any person who did not accept a pope's election was automatically excommunicated, and if they were a bishop, their ordinations were automatically invalidated. This is the procedure we have today. The council also set limits for expenditures, such as travel. As of 1179, archbishops were no longer allowed to travel with more than 40 to 50 horses, depending on the diocese. Cardinals couldn't travel with more than 25 of them, bishops 20 to 30, and archdeacons 7. No hunting hawks or falcons were allowed either in travel, which is precisely why you never see bishops traveling around with them today. Now, around this time, a lot of smaller-scale heretical
bit is so goofy.
in towns and regions across Europe. When bishops saw them as becoming too powerful and threatening to Christian society, whose laws depended on a commitment to religious orthodoxy, they appealed to Rome for advice and often sought action against these groups. The Third Lateran Council, for example, excommunicated a growing group known as the Cathars, who believed in a dualistic universe governed by 2 gods and that the material world was evil. There is evidence that many of them viewed procreation as evil, and they were accused of having committed abortions and infanticide. While it's difficult to gauge how accurate these claims were, the Cathars were eventually brutally exterminated, and that extermination was justified by an appeal to this council. On a similarly dark note, the council dealt with Jews quite harshly, declaring that the testimony of a Christian in court counts more than that of a Jew's, and whoever took a
Based.
Jew's testimony over a Christian's risked excommunication. This obviously led to abuses of Jews in the court system. Well, that's it for this council. We'll see
Not
you in Lateran
based.
4 next episode. As always, have a great day. God bless you.
Alright, so I just remembered while I was watching the video that I forgot to talk about the Lateran II Council in the last video, the summary. So the Lateran II Council took place in 1139, and it was also not cited in the Catechism, just like Lateran I. And the major decision they made last time was formalize the discipline of priestly celibacy for the Western Church, which was a disciplinary decision. And it was the establishment of not only celibacy, but making sure that we are properly conducting ourselves when it comes to business within the church, and that we are getting rid of all this cohabitating and these impure means of doing simony, letting avarice lead us, property and whatnot, just a bunch of bad stuff. So now we get to the Third Lateran Council of 1179 AD. And the introduction for here is going to be by an agreement reached at Venice in 1177, the bitter conflict which had risen about 20 years earlier between Pope Alexander III in 1159 to 1181 and Emperor Frederick 1152 to 1190 was brought to an end. For when Pope Hadrian IV had died in 1159, the cardinals elected two popes together, namely Roland of Siena, who took the name of Alexander III, and Octavian of Rome, who, though he was nominated by fewer cardinals, nevertheless with the support of the Emperor Frederick, usurped the name of Pope Victor IV. The emperor, wishing to remove everything which stood in the way of his authority in Italy, declared war upon the Italian states, and especially the Roman Church, which, after its struggle for the ecclesiastical library for so many years, was enjoying great authority. The emperor carried on the war for a long time. A serious schism had arisen out of this conflict, and after Victor IV, two anti-popes were nominated in opposition to Alexander III, namely Pascal III, 1164 to 1168, and Callistus III, 1168 to 1178. At last, when Alexander had gained the victory, he promised the emperor at Venice that he would summon a general council. The particular object of this council was to put an end to the schism within the church and the quarrel between the emperor and the papacy. It was summoned by Pope Alexander in 1178, quote, so that according to the custom of the ancient fathers, the good should be sought and confirmed by many, and that with the cooperation of grace of the Holy Spirit, by the efforts of all, there should be carried out what was required for the correction of abuses and the establishment of what was pleasing to God, end quote. The council was held at Rome in March 1179. About 300 fathers assembled from the provinces of Europe and from some from the Latin East, and a single legate from the Greek Church. It began on March 5th, according to the Archbishop William of Tyre, of our chief of authority. The bishop first heard Rufinus, Bishop of Assisi, who in highly polished address praised the Roman pontiff and the Roman Church, quote, that the Church, to which alone belongs the decision and power to summon a general council, to lay down new canons and counsel the old. Indeed, though the fathers had summoned a solemn council many times in the past, yet the obligation and reason to do this was never more expedient than the present. We do not have the same reasons for doubting the ecumenical nature of this council as we have for Lateran I and II, for the way in which the council was summoned and conducted by the Pope, and the number of fathers who gathered for the whole Latin world and devoted their efforts to strengthening the unity of the Church and condemning the heretics, resemble rather the ancient councils than Lateran I and II, and exemplify the typical council of the Middle Ages presided over by the Roman pontiff. For this reason, it is not surprising that the chronicles of the period frequently refer to this council as Lateran I. Although we do not possess the acts of the council, we have evidence from the chronicles and the annals, and especially from the canons which the fathers laid down in the final session on March 19th. Accordingly, to avoid future schisms, it was first laid down that nobody was to be regarded as the Roman pontiff unless it had been elected by 2/3 of the cardinals. Canon 1. All appointments by anti-popes were deemed invalid. In Canon 2, heuristics called cathars were excommunicated, and likewise were bands of mercenaries, or rather criminals, which were causing utter destruction in some parts of Europe. It was declared that this seems an innovation, that aim should be taken up against them. Canon 27. It was also decided not to pass judgment on the preaching of Waldensians. All this seems to have been directed to strengthening the unity of the Church. In addition, Alexander III and the Fathers, renewing the precedent of Lateran I and II, laid down several canons for the reform of the Church, and some concerning morals and civil affairs. The canons of this council played a notable part in the future government of the Church. They were frequently included in the collections of decretals compiled in the late 12th and early 13th century, and afterwards all were inserted into Pope Gregory IX's decretals. Walter Holtzmann and other scholars considered that these decretral collections in fact arose from this Lateran Council and its canons. Certainly the canons, unlike those of Lateran I and II and many preceding councils, appear to have been worked out by an excellent legal mind, so that it is probable that they were composed under the authority of Alexander III himself, who was an expert lawyer. The canons, except for those which refer to Lateran II or the Council of Reims in 1148, see Canons 2:11 and 20 to 22, or to Gratian's decrees, see Canon 1 to 4, 7, 11, 13 to 14, 17 to 18, are new and original. The tradition of the canons has not yet been adequately explained and remains very uncertain. Many manuscripts, codices, survive for this council, in contrast to Lateran I and II. However, they do not seem to give us a version of the canons which was confined by an ecclesiastical authority, which Archbishop William of Turin, with the authority of the Fathers, had himself drawn up. Frequently the canons are to be found in the chronicles and decretral collections. They are included in 4 contemporary English chronicles, those of Abbot Benedict of Peterborough, Gervase of Canterbury, William of Newburgh, and Roger of Hoveden. And in the following collections of the decretrals, the collection called the Appendix of the Lateran Council, the collections, okay, so they're just talking about that. And they're talking about all the other things that are just references. As things now stand, it is impossible to use all known sources for our edition, for these sources reveal only a limited part of the whole tradition, and what is even more important, we do not yet understand the relations between the individual traditions. Even Harold has not examined these relations sufficiently. We therefore preferred to publish the text of the singular tradition, namely the appendix of the Lateran Council, using CR2 and RM, all the other blah blah language that they're using. So again, I'm going to pause and I'm just going to give you guys kind of snapshots on what's going on here. So I will be back in a moment. So I've already gotten to Canon 6, but already what we're seeing is the College of Cardinals is established, and this is to prevent corruption from happening, where emperors are trying to depose popes, and they're trying to put in popes, and they're trying to do all these things that the Lateran I and II councils fought against. So this is a way to fight corruption that the bishops have to have a union of at least 2/3 agreement on who the pope is going to be, so that we can properly appoint a leader. But also, there's more rules on what priests and bishops need to do. And apparently there was this practice of, basically, if there was suspicion of legal action being taken against you, that you would then therefore retaliate with your own excommunication or investigation on them, which is very unbecoming of the church. But I thought that was interesting. Alright, the next point of interest is Canon 17. Specifically that, they thought that there ought to be one superior in the church. That we aren't putting multiple cooks in the kitchen. And so the church is trying to cleave the administration and get it down to a point where we aren't having multiple people fighting, but we do have a management system. We actually do have a hierarchical structure within the leadership, which also we see in why we have the Pope in the Catholic Church. So it's just a interesting development of keeping that hierarchical structure even in the lower tiers of the even at the individual churches. And I will be back when I get the next interesting point. So the rest of the canons basically come down to the church is trying to build on top of what they were doing in Lateran 1 and Lateran 2, which is cut the fat of the church and to make sure that we aren't falling into avarice and we aren't trying to use property for arrogant reasons. We're not trying to encroach on the church's ability to do things. To cut out the corruption of making deals behind closed doors, of doing secret handshakes, of stealing people away from the church to other churches, of there not being a real unity in the church, and trying to solve that by bringing us together, by seeking unity, by making it so we can only interact with property and certain transactions in an honorable way and not in a way to try to get gain and to do it at the expense of your brothers and sisters. Just a bunch of different things. But anyways, the main thing to take away from this is that Lateran 3 is trying to set up that administration system to make it so we're not only having the admins like they established in previous councils, but now we're making sure that we have a superior admin or a superior priest or a superior position. So we aren't having all this vying for power and this fighting, because, you heard it, that they basically had two popes, and then one of the popes had anti-popes that they tried to wage war, like political war, with their brothers and sisters, and it's goofy. But the main thing is, it's a good thing that they got rid of the anti-popes. It's a good thing they got rid of all the other popes that could be put in, and that it's something that happens through not only the coming together of the bishops, but it requiring a 2/3 majority is really important to fight corruption and to continue to make it hard for humans to keep trying to interrupt and make the Catholic Church worse and corrupted and icky. But that is everything, guys. Let's get to the final summary, and then I will send you guys off. So what we talked about today is the Lateran 3 Council, which took place in 1179 AD. This is also a council that's not cited in the Catechism. And the major decision they made was establishing a papal election by the College of Cardinals, which is a disciplinary decision to combat all the corruption and goofiness that came from the emperor and trying to seize power and doing what humans do best. But like I said, that is everything, guys. Feel free to bully me in the comments and tell me why I'm wrong. I look forward to hearing from you guys. I hope you guys have a blessed day, and bye to you all.